Welcome to a special edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 150. I'm here with Father Argo, and we're going to talk about terrorism. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm Father Argo. Today is the 9th of January.
We're going to do a real unscripted episode here because Father Argo and I are going to talk about something that's a tough topic, and we need to be real about it. We're going to talk about terrorism, jihadists, the Muslim faith, and Christians' response to it, or what the Christian response should be to it. A lot of people don't have a lot of experience with what's been going on. It's something new as far as in the last 2 or 3 centuries. Jihadism has kind of risen up since, I guess, Russia invaded Afghanistan. That was kind of the started a wave of recent jihadism. And we want to find out, what is causing this? Certainly economic factors, political factors, and all that. But when you sit down at the end of the day, people will tell you either Islam is a religion of peace or Islam is a religion of violence. And Father Argo has been in the countries where Shia and Sunni Islam are the religion of the day. And I thought it would be a great chance for you to speak to this. Let's just hit the $64,000 question out of the park. Is Islam a religion of peace?
That is the big question. That's the question that we get the most everywhere we travel across the U.S. It's something we grapple with in the field. I live in a 99% Islamic republic with Sharia law. And this is where I get into trouble with both sides, sort of the appeasement side and those who take a much harder line. Americans struggle with complicated issues and complicated answers. And there's I can't give you a one-sentence soundbite that just lays it all out. The issue we have, first off, is that this is what Americans need to understand. When you say Muslim, you're saying Protestant. Mm-hmm. There are 175 major sects of Islam. There are 4 schools of jurisprudence just within Sunni Islam. And it would be like trying to compare a high church Lutheran or Anglican with a charismatic snake handler. We don't have we disagree on some very, very profound issues. So that's the starting point, is to understand that Muslims are not monolithic. And when we have this kind of conversation, then you really need to drill down on what kind of Muslim are we talking about, and also from what part of the world. So a Sunni in North Africa would be very different in ways from a Sunni where we live. Mm-hmm. And you have to do your homework here a little bit and drill down, and you're just not going to get a clear soundbite.
So the answer is we don't know.
Well,
or the answer
I
is,
can get you a little closer.
Okay.
There are let's get to reality here. Within the Noble Quran, there are 109 verses prescribing violence against non-believers. Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean that's fact. The big question, though, then is defining who is a non-believer. I think the majority view is that, and it's been the traditional view of Islam, that Christians get put in the category of believer. Okay, we're not. The question is, who is a kafir? Mm-hmm. Is a kafir a non-believer, a non-Muslim, or is it a little more narrow than that? Is someone who doesn't believe in God at all? So I would say the more traditional viewpoint, and I would argue the majority viewpoint, is that they would say that no, these are my friends. I talk to them. I debate with them. That Christians are not kafir. But there are others who interpret kafir as just non-Muslims. And so Christians then come into the gun sight. So it's really an issue of how a jurist, how they interpret the Quran, and then which side they come down on. Mm-hmm. That's something really important for us to know.
Well, the Quran itself gives 2 ways to treat Christians. One is we treat our Christians fairly, and one we do treat them as infidels. So that leaves us in that paradox.
Well, welcome to the world of the Quran.
Yeah.
It contradicts itself all over the place. That's a common thread throughout the Quran, as you're going to see it make contradictory statements everywhere you turn.
Mm-hmm.
And that's primarily because the prophet cobbled together many religions, into what they call the final revelation. They don't sort of oppose that idea. It's sort of, they say he drew from the best. Mm-hmm. But what happens when you're drawing around is you're pulling out contradictory things with each other, and that puts them there. And it also sort of depended on the mood Muhammad was in. Mm-hmm. He became more violent as he grew older. And so what happens is you'll see the earlier verses be more peaceable and the latter verses become more violent. And so you have this dichotomy, this paradox within the Quran. It is not, as the Bible is, it's not self-consistent. It's not consistent with itself. And that's a problem for us.
It is. Now, we also have the problem of the offending. And you and I, before we started talking about what we're going to talk about, we said we really can't talk about the Prophet Muhammad. Mm-hmm. And there's reasons for that, because we don't want to offend. Mm-hmm. And the offense that Islam and Muslims take is really not understandable to us in a Western context. We think of Islam as a religion and a political system, and it's hard for us to understand how they could be offended when we live in this free society.
Mm-hmm. To the point, there's no word in classic Arabic for secular.
Right.
So there's nothing, they can't conceive of it. There's no possibility. And that's another problem Americans have, Westerners have, is we don't have anything to compare Islam to. We don't have anything like it. And so Islam is everything. It's a tawhid, a unity. And so there's no secular space for us to sort of negotiate, meet, talk. That doesn't exist for them. That's not a reality. That's why our diplomacy and politics ultimately aren't going to work. And negotiation, it's not going to work because there's no space for us to negotiate ultimately. And so Islam is not a religion. It's a worldview. It's this all-encompassing unity. Religion is a piece of it, but also our politics and diplomacy and our civil life. It's all together under this umbrella of Islam and nothing outside of it. And so navigating those waters too, like we say, in the field especially, just don't talk about the prophet. The line is, let Jesus get bigger and the prophet gets smaller.
Sure.
As Jesus gets bigger in the heart and mind of a Muslim, Muhammad will start to disappear. He'll get smaller and ultimately go away. And so that's a better way to go. Another thing is, it's not really good missional strategy to kind of come in and say, you worship a moon god and you're pagans and your book is garbage and we should burn it. That's not really a helpful strategy missiologically. Allah means God. I worshiped a couple months ago in Iraq with Christians who have been calling God Allah for 2,000 years. Okay, we worship in Aramaic. They use Allah for God. The first Bible, the Syriac Bible, refers to God as Allah. So now we have a difference on the understanding of who God is, the character and nature of God, but we are still talking about one supreme, omnipotent, omniscient being. And so let's begin there. There are things we can work with in the Quran. The Quran is 70% the Bible. There's a lot that we can, it's best when you come into a new place to sort of find commonalities without watering down and without compromising. And we have some maneuvering space there to begin building relationships and having fruitful discussions with Muslims.
Well, you've been in Iraq where clearly there's a problem between the Sunni and the Shias. Which would be an interfaith conflict. It's not just the Christians, it's not just the infidels, it's not just the Buddhists. This conflict goes beyond what an understanding that we would have in the West.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's vicious, particularly between the Sunni and Shia. That's really the big issue we're seeing right now in that part of the world is really ultimately is Iran and Saudi Arabia going at it. Everything else there is symptomatic and playing off of Sunni Saudi Arabia and Shia Iran. That's what's going on. The divide is so great. It was very interesting to us in Iraq, where we were told that by the locals that if you had an area now that's occupied by ISIS, which the people living there, even most of the Muslims, won't like very much. But if the Iraqi army tries to come liberate them, and the Iraqi army is considered Shia, that the local Arabs, the local Iraqis, will join sides with ISIS, whom they don't like because they like the Shia less, the Iraqi army. So you see that intractable situation we're put in, sort of politically, militarily, as we're stuck with an Iraqi army that's considered Shia by the rest of the population, and they would rather deal with ISIS. That's how deep this divide goes.
Now, remarkably, this is not just a Middle Eastern problem. In the last 50 years, there's been a larger influx of Muslims into countries like France, Norway, Sweden, Europe, here in America, Minnesota, places like that. And different countries have settled with the Muslims in different ways, and how they assimilate with the culture or don't let the culture assimilate, allow for Sharia law or don't allow for it. What works when having an influx, we call it, of this worldview come to your country?
And don't forget, it's here in the U.S.
In Minnesota especially.
Sure, you have a big Somali population, among others.
Yeah.
The Islam is the second largest religion in 24 states now in the United States. Our home in Texas, it's the fastest growing Islamic part of America. Mm-hmm. Houston, Texas is the fastest growing Islamic city in the country. In 10 years, there'll be more Muslims there than Dearborn, Michigan. There'll be 1 million Muslims. San Antonio is number 3, and Dallas is number 8. The common denominator is Hispanics. 80% of converts to Islam in America now are Hispanic. Mm-hmm. So it's coming. It's here. So now we get back to how do we deal with that?
What do we do?
Well, what we've learned first is what not to do. As a philosopher, sometimes we start with how to describe something is to say what it not is, what the negative is. Don't do what Europe's done. Because what's interesting is
let's explain what Europe did. They allowed for a pluralistic society. Yep. Where yep. Sharia law could be exercised by the Muslims, the Islam people, and the French law or the Norwegian law would be recognized by the indigenous population.
Sure.
And poof.
And by Sharia law, when they reach 51% of the population, they must rule. Mm-hmm. And Muslim birth rates, they're outpopulating us in the West, in Europe, and in America, 7-1. Now, if you think about it, a Muslim man can have 4 wives. On average, they have 6 children, so one man can have 24 children. They're playing a long game here, but it's growing so quickly. What we've been saying for the past few years is they're going to start feeling their oats and start making noise, because they're reaching that point of population growth where they really are gaining traction and they can start flexing their muscle, and people won't like what they see. What's interesting, though, is their playbook is always the same. That's one good thing we have here. When they come into an area, what they start asking for initially are rights for themselves. So they'll ask for Sharia law just for themselves. Okay, and that's where Europe has begun to capitulate. In England, for example, Great Britain, they've actually instituted the Islamic accounting system as one of the 2 official accounting systems. Yeah. In Birmingham, England, they have chased out the Western teachers, hired Islamic teachers, and have Sharia law in their government-funded schools. So it's mission creep. They encroach. It's what they do, and they don't do otherwise until they hit 51%. And then we get to the great statement by Erdogan, the Prime Minister of Turkey, who said, "Don't worry, democracy is just the train we're riding until we get where we want to go." Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's encroachment until they become the majority, and then anybody, I defy you, give me an example where a Islamic majority allows freedom for the minority. Mm-hmm. It doesn't exist anywhere. So that's what we're looking at coming at Europe, and it's already beginning here. There is a Sharia law court in Texas. They're practicing Sharia in the state of Texas, based out of Dallas. That's what's happening.
Now, we're going to back up because we're recording this program because of the terrorist event in Paris yesterday and today. It was just resolved about an hour ago. Jihadism. Okay, let's explain jihadism, and we'll let you start.
Okay. Well, again, it comes down to how you interpret that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a classic interpretation that jihad means struggle, and it's the self struggle. It's the struggle to follow God
Mm-hmm.
within yourself. It can also then easily be defined as the struggle with others, with outsiders, so non-Muslims or kafir non-believers. So we really get back. There's a good interpretation of it. I mean, as a Christian, my goal is to become holier, to become like Jesus. That's a jihad within myself. I'm struggling against my sin nature, and allow Jesus to redeem me daily. But then again, there's the negative application as well. So it goes back to your interpretation of that word, and they differ
Mm-hmm.
with Islam. There's great disagreement.
What we see in France is called jihadism, radical jihad. Let's explain what that is.
Well, that would be the imposition of Islam
Mm-hmm.
on all by force, and backing up a little bit too. Well, first, that just saw a recent survey. 29% of Muslims in France between the ages of 18 and 30 are sympathetic to ISIS.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. That's been one of the fallacies that I've heard is people have told me in England, oh, but when these people come here and assimilate, their kids are going to assimilate and be part of our great pluralistic culture. And no, we've seen the opposite, actually. They become more radical at the younger ages. So we get into, they've embraced then this idea of jihad, which is, really Islam by the sword. You convert or die. That's what we saw in Iraq. And that's their interpretation of it, and it's certainly a robust interpretation of it.
Now, I want to just interrupt here with talking a little bit about Egypt. The current president of Egypt is trying to fight radical Islam, and he gave a speech at Christmas time at a Coptic church. Can there be a stand against it? And he called the imams accountable and said, "This is our fault. This is the fault of the teachers of the church. You're not holding people accountable. We're not teaching the right things in our synagogues in our we're just not teaching the right thing." And so, how does this change?
That's a great point. And I tell folks in America and in the West that a good way to see Islam, to think about it, because again, we need comparisons. We need to sort of give ourselves some reference points, is as pre-Reformation Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
is that they have a book that the clergy caste doesn't want the people really getting into. And so what the imams do is, I mean, first off, 80% of the world's Muslims don't speak Arabic, so they're never even going to read the Quran. And then, so what happens is that the imams, the teachers, the authorities will, just like the pre-Reformation clergy, can sort of make things up.
Mm-hmm.
They cherry pick what they want to talk about, and they also put things in there that aren't really there. One of our strategies in the field, actually, is one of the best things that ever happened to us is the Muslims themselves making the Quran available in the vernacular.
Mm-hmm.
And that was for their missionary purposes, strategies. But it's been very helpful to us because we can sit with a Muslim and look at some places in the Quran that they had never heard of before, that their imams have never taught them. And we sort of, and the things about Jesus especially, Jesus born of a virgin, announced by angels, lived a perfect life, raised the dead, cured the sick, went to God, will come back and be the judge on Judgment Day. And the Quran gives you permission to read the gospel, the Injil. So when they hear that, they start piecing together and saying, what? My imam's been lying to me. What else have they lied to me about? So yeah, there is some pressure on them, but it's also the missionary task as well. That's a great bridge building tool, is to know a little bit about the Quran. You don't need much, but you can point them in some directions to get them thinking a bit. But that's the problem, is a big problem of it is really you're at the mercy of how your imam interprets it for you, whether it's, internal jihad or external jihad. Mm. It does come down to the imams, yes.
And finally, we need to talk about the Christian response. The WWJ issue here. What are we supposed to do in terms of everything about this looks bad? The numbers look bad. The encroachment here in America amongst the world. We're not giving people a lot of good news. Help me out here.
There's great news, and that's God is at work, and the gospel trumps all, and that's not pie in the sky. We are seeing. We're a very small community of those of us Americans who work in the Islamic world, and we talk and we study a lot and we watch, and there is an outbreak of Jesus in the Islamic world right now. We're seeing it all over the place. We have, since 9/11, we have 69 recorded Jesus movements in the Islamic world, which are when we see within an Islamic indigenous community where we see 100 new church plants or 1,000 baptisms over a 20-year period. My family, we are directly involved with 2 new Jesus movements going on right now in 2 parts of the world. One is Iraq, because you know I'm there. We're seeing it happen. I think we've already passed those numbers there. So God is making a move on the Islamic world right now. Then the question is, so how do we join God? What do we do? How do we do what God? Because God is doing something. He's not letting this just happen and roll. In Iraq, the devil just overplayed his hand. ISIS opened the way to the gospel. The Yazidi have never heard the gospel in 2,000 years because they've been isolated on the mountain. Because of what ISIS did, them coming down off the mountain, they're hearing the gospel and they're responding. And the Muslims now, Kevin, we are getting emails and pictures every day of Muslims in Kurdistan, northern Iraq, coming to Christ because of the love being shown them by Christians who are reaching out to them, who are providing relief supplies, who are caring for them. They're sick of what they're seeing from ISIS, and they're associating that with Islam. They're making that connection. I'm not saying it. And then also the actual proclamation of the gospel.
Well,
and so it's working.
That is the interesting point here, is the paradox of the evil they see. They want to flee from that.
Yeah, they see it, and they're seeing something different and real, and what they're ultimately hardwired for is they are seeing the love of God and these Christians who have been persecuted now turning around and caring for them. I know them, I have met them, I have sat next to them, I've worshiped with them, prayed with them, they're my friends, and it's been this the mark of a true disciple is love. It's been witnessing to them in love and prayer. Muslims will almost always let you pray for them. Even very devout practicing ones in Jesus' name. It's because Jesus heals in the Quran, if they know that. Otherwise, you show them. So you ask what we can do. Number one, this is a time to get on our knees in America and pray and fast for our own country and for what God is doing in the world, because we're seeing a collision of 2 kingdoms right now. It's the kingdom of darkness and the kingdom of light. Ultimately, I'm going to get in trouble from this and banned from some websites, but Islam comes under the kingdom of darkness. And there I said it. That's the gospel. So Jesus is pushing back that, but there's a collision right now, and it's happening in Europe, it's happening in the Middle East, it's happening where we live, it's coming to America, don't worry. But so number one is pray, fast. We must be a fasting people, and then love. And it's going out the great reading for this Sunday from Isaiah. We're a bruised reed, he will not break, and not to, Jonathan Edwards talks about us, going quietly and not making a lot of noise. This king didn't come with a lot of clamor and noise and a marching band. He came in truth and love. And so we need to go that way, the way he did. And that's, in America, we need to reach out in love and relationship with our Muslim neighbors, because if we don't, they will isolate and radicalize. We have got to engage them. Then in the world right now, Kevin, we are seeing this breakout of Jesus movements across the world, but we don't have enough workers. We only have 2,000 full-time workers for 1.6 billion Muslims. Americans only give 1/2 of 1 penny to the 1.6 billion unreached. So we have to give, and we have to send, and we have to pray overseas, or it will come to us. And then here, we need to pray, also to fast, and to build bridges, to reach out and share the gospel.
Father Argo, I want to thank you for your time. You're heading back to your original mission field and then to Iraq around Easter time. How can people financially help you?
That would be great, and it's just investing in God's mission. We're just doing what God's doing. So our website is www.lovefortheleast.org, www.lovefortheleast.org, and if you designate anything going to Iraq right now, 100% gets there for the refugees. We have a great team on the ground. They have everything they need there. They can purchase. We just have to get money to them and pray for them as well. And then we go check in to see how the needs are evolving, making sure that there's good stewardship, accountability. But if you would pray us up, and if the investments in the relief supplies are paying incredible dividends for the kingdom in Iraq right now. I mean, every day we are seeing people come to Jesus. And then where we are in the Islamic Republic, we're launching an underground church movement that needs a lot of resourcing, materials, training, and we are taking down one of the key Islamic strongholds in the world, where U.S. embassy attacks have been planned, the headquarters for Al-Shabaab and Al-Qaeda. We are seeing that come down. We are seeing it fall, but we need help.
Absolutely. Keep Father Argo and his family in your prayers, and we'll get an update when you return from Iraq sometime in the spring or summer.
That'd be great.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, brother.